What is up, everybody? We are back here at King Film Sports, and after a very lopsided week of games here in the wild card weekend, 4 of these games being blowouts, we get into a divisional round power ranking here. Also going to be getting into some QB rankings, so let me know your guys' opinions in the comments down below. These rankings will be probably slightly controversial, but all opinions are welcome in the comments. As always, be sure to like and subscribe, and now let's get into it. So my criteria for these power rankings is solely neutral field point spread favorability. If these two teams played on a neutral field, who would be favored according to Vegas here? I think that's a pretty good criteria for these power rankings. And at the number 1 spot here, I'm going to be taking the Ravens, and I feel somewhat vindicated. I told you guys in my playoff video, I gave out the Ravens plus 650 to hoist the Lombardi Trophy to win the Super Bowl there. They're currently sitting around plus 550 or 5-1. I don't mind those odds as much. Maybe you just want to take them in each individual games and then roll over the winnings there. But this weekend in Buffalo, Ravens are looking like they're going to be the favorite in that game, and you're obviously getting 2 points of home field for Buffalo here in the inclement weather as well. And I just think that this Baltimore team is wholesale the best team, especially with that defense trending where it was at the end of last season. We saw that they were very weak to start the season. Some of those losses, especially that Raiders game in week 2, was just heinous, how that secondary was just open for the taking. But now the secondary's clamped down, and you saw in that Steelers game in the first half, 4 Steelers drives all end in punts there. I don't even think they crossed midfield in that one. The Steelers could not run the ball with Najee Harris or Jalen Warren. And really the only 2 Steelers scores were just late game garbage time. Yes, they did get open downfield, Van Jefferson over the top, and then George Pickens. But I think those were kind of fluky, and Baltimore really kind of laid down their swords. It wasn't really a game. And when it was, Derrick Henry and that Lamar Jackson-led offense was really good in that game. They really just ran it down the Steelers' throats, no variance at all. And I think that Lamar Jackson is going to get 10 to 15 carries in all of these games. Yes, I know they'll be going on the road to Buffalo and then likely to Kansas City and then a tough Super Bowl matchup potentially. But I do think that this Ravens team is pound for pound the best team. They'll be favored in Buffalo, and then if they win, I think that they will be favored in Kansas City and then favored in the Super Bowl here. Yes, Lamar Jackson tends to choke in the postseason, and I'll go over that within my QB rankings after we get through all these power rankings. But pound for pound, this Ravens team is the best, let alone if they get Zay Flowers, their wide receiver 1 back for any of these games here down the stretch. Then next we get to the number 2 spot here with the Buffalo Bills, and I do think that the differentiating factor is the defenses of both of these teams, especially the pass rush of the Bills. I'm not sure if we can really trust that, let alone if they're losing, can they really stop the run game of Baltimore? We saw that in week 4 when these two teams played in Baltimore, and Derrick Henry just had a day for the ages, and Lamar Jackson was great through the air. And so I know that the Buffalo offense is every bit as good as the Ravens offense potentially, but that defense, I know they have Milano back here, but I'm just a little bit wary of what they're going to be doing. Yes, they did get some other pieces back as well from injury who were out in the later stage of this season, and we saw them give up 40-plus points against the Lions and the Rams on the road here. So yes, I know they've improved from that point, but are they as good on defense as this Baltimore team? I just do not think so. Yes, Josh Allen can put the team on his back, score 35 points in every one of these games and lead them to the Super Bowl, but I will take the Buffalo Bills at the number 2 spot there. And then at number 3, I'm sure there's going to be some outrage in the comments. Chiefs won 2 Super Bowls, and then we're 15-1 in the games that Mahomes played this season. So how can I have them at 3? And yes, it's fair if you feel that way, but I just think that this Chiefs offense, especially that offensive line, is going to be very maligned here in the upcoming weeks. I think it's going to be good enough to hold up against the Texans, and they do have that home field advantage against whoever they play, the Ravens or the Bills in the AFC title game. So they may win those games. I think it'll probably be a toss-up at home, or they'll be the underdog at home against the Bills or the Ravens. And Mahomes can definitely put the team on his back. They get Hollywood Brown here, and then Travis Kelce. Although he took a dip in the regular season, he's always going to be great in the playoffs. We know that. Just chalk him up for 8 catches, 100 yards, and a touchdown or 2. And then this defense has been pretty good here, but that secondary that's dealt with a couple injuries. We'll see if Jalen Watson is back for that team. I think that is huge. And then we'll see if the D-line is as good as it was in the regular season. So again, margins are very tight. I think they are within a couple points of both the Ravens and Buffalo. Obviously, they lost in Buffalo earlier this year, and in the first week on the Thursday night game, almost lost to the Ravens. That was a great game there, but probably outplayed Baltimore throughout that game. So yes, Mahomes, like Josh Allen, we've seen can put the team on his back, already has 3 Lombardi trophies, but I do think that they are the 3rd-ranked team just because of that offensive inconsistency throughout the season. Then we finally get to an NFC team here. I'm taking the Lions at the number 4 spot here. I do think that they are getting more healthy on that defense, which is very good to see. I still think that the defense is the weak link of the team here. I think if any team is trailing, that defensive line is just not as good as it was with Hutchinson earlier in the season, especially that secondary can be victimized, as we saw in that Bills game and then the Packers game on the Thursday night. And I know they only lost 2 games all year, but even that Monday night game against a corpse of a Niners team almost victimized them there. So I just think this offense is going to have to be damn near perfect for the Lions to go on a Super Bowl run, which surely it can be, as they do have the home field advantage going through Ford Field there. But I just think that if they get into one of these shootouts, Jared Goff, we've seen him mess up in some of these high leverage situations. Remember that 17-point choke job in the NFC title game last year in San Francisco. So they are the best team in the NFC, according to me. Point spread on a neutral field and obviously home field, as I mentioned. But I cannot favor them against any of these top 3 AFC teams. Then we get to the number 2 NFC contender, and it's the Eagles. And I think I might have to bump them down after last week, as they had a 4-0 turnover edge against the Packers and only won by 12 points in that one. And it was just an odd game from the start, with Keyshawn Nixon fumbling the ball on the kickoff return and clearly had it, but I did bet the Packers there, so I guess I'm just a little salty in that game. But Jalen Hurts, yes, he had the 2 touchdowns, but only threw for a little over 100 yards and 60% completion percentage. No really impressive throws to me, but if they can just run the ball with Saquon Barkley, I think that's going to be good enough to potentially win the NFC there. But once again, cannot favor them against any of the AFC teams. Just with the quarterback play of Jalen Hurts, I'm going to have to see him play a lot better. And Devontae Smith didn't really get involved, and A.J. Brown was just reading on the sidelines. That was his most infamous moment of that game. He was not really involved. He did have the good Dallas Goedert catch and then stiff arm down the sideline for a touchdown. But yeah, can't really take much away from that Packers game other than the Packers' devastating injuries, and even the Eagles had a couple injuries in that defense, so we'll monitor that. But I definitely think that the defense is the strength of the team at this point for the Eagles, but Saquon and that running game definitely formidable in their own right there. Then at the 6th spot, we've got the Vikings-Rams winner, recording before this game here. Hopefully it's very entertaining, like that Bucs-Commanders game, and not like the other 4. Definitely think that the Vikings are potentially more dangerous here. What does concern me about this Vikings team, and I'll mention this in my divisional round predictions and betting locks tomorrow, is that this Minnesota team had their bye week, I think in week 5. So they've just been playing all of these games here, and they went down to the wire to try and get the NFC number 1 seed. I think that they really needed that. And you look at the recent games, they played on December 16th, the Monday night game against the Bears. Maybe you don't remember that. They blew out the Bears. Then on a short week, they go to Seattle. Sam Darnold leads a heroic comeback drive. They win that game by 3. Then another high leverage game in week 17. Obviously, they win against the Packers by 2 at home, really controlled all of that game. Then they go to Detroit last week and have the Sunday night meltdown in the second half there, end up losing by 22. So my point here is that they've played all of these high leverage games, home, away, and they've played for 14 straight weeks at this point. And now the Monday night game, the short turnaround, going from Arizona back home, then to Philadelphia potentially. I think that could get in their way, but I do think that they are probably more dangerous than this Rams team. If the Rams had to play the Eagles, I don't love their odds. Yes, Stafford could put on a superhero cape and lead them to a victory there by scoring 30-plus points, but I do not like their offensive line against the Eagles, and I think that Philly could just push them over, especially Saquon on the ground. I think that he could have 200-plus yards, as we saw in that Sunday night matchup in SoFi earlier this season there. So I don't think that either of those teams match up particularly well with Philadelphia there, especially if Jalen Hurts somehow turns it on here in the playoffs. So I do have those teams at the 6th spot, but if they do beat Philadelphia and Sam Darnold potentially unlocking his earlier season form, or this Rams team is revitalized looking like the 2021 version, you might have to look out, but we'll see how this game goes tonight. Then at the 7th and 8th spots, don't really believe in either of these teams would be massive if they at least made it close in either of those games. I have the Commanders at the 7th spot just because of how Jaden Daniels is playing. People say he's the best quarterback in the NFC right now, and I can't really disagree with them. Again, it is a rookie going on the road in these playoff games, so eventually it's going to have to fizzle out. But for now, it's very impressive. This defense with the veterans under Dan Quinn definitely playing much better than I thought going into the season, and just a great win against Tampa Bay. They're going to go for it on a lot of these 4th downs, very much like the Lions. So with that variance, I could see them potentially getting an upset of Jared Goff and the Lions there, but they're probably going to just have to rely on that offense scoring 35 or 40 points in that game. Daniels is going to have to play flawlessly. So very low margin for error from that Commanders team, but just very impressive for them to get to this point. And then at the 8th spot, we've got the Texans here. It's going to be very interesting to see them go on the road to Kansas City, because we did see that game on the Saturday before Christmas, week 16. They were 3.5-point underdogs, only ended up losing by 8, but lost Tank Dell very infamously in that game. I do think that the defense is probably the best part of this team, with Daniil Hunter and some of those edge rushers. If they can match up and get some sacks against this Kansas City team, get some pressure on Mahomes, I think that they could potentially make it interesting there. But I'm going to have to see more out of CJ Stroud. What he did against the Chargers, yes, it was decent in the second half, but his first half performance, they're going to be down potentially 20 points if they play like that in Kansas City. So I think that this matchup is not great for them, and then having to play either Baltimore or Buffalo on the road is a very tough path, especially with the lack of weapons. Nico Collins potentially locked down by the top corner of every one of these teams, and then you're going to have to be looking for answers. And especially in a trailing game script, I do not not think that they can ride Joe Mixon on the ground as much as they would like to there. So impressive win by 20 points against the Chargers there, but I do not love the Texans' chances going forward. And then we get into the quarterback rankings here, and I'm going to be running through this very quickly here, and I do not even have Stafford or Darnold here because I haven't seen them play in the playoffs yet. Darnold, as of this point, hasn't even started a playoff game in his whole career. But in the S tier, I know this is going to be slightly controversial. Give me Allen and Mahomes. Yes, I know that Allen has not even made a Super Bowl at this point, but I think that his performances, especially against the Chiefs in some of these playoff games, has not been the issue. I think it's been the defense that has really let him down in these losses in the playoffs. And then Mahomes, I mean, his resume speaks for itself at this point. Definitely him in the S tier. And I know Lamar Jackson, very prolific season here, but he's going to be in the A tier. And maybe some could be arguing that because this is a playoff power ranking of these quarterbacks, he should be in the B tier. But I think I've seen enough at this season. I do not think that he's going to be antsy at this point. I think that we've seen him elevate from those first couple playoff starts against the Chargers in 2018 and the Titans in 2019. I think that he's much better than that. And I think that this Monken-led offense with the play calling will be much better for him. And I think that he's going to utilize his legs, especially in these games coming down the stretch here. So give me him A tier, but we're going to have some tough conversations if he chokes this week in Buffalo. Then we get to the B tier, and in this one, I have Jared Goff. He's been all right, so-so in the playoffs throughout his career. He had a couple very tough ones with the LA Rams back in the day. Remember that one in Green Bay in the COVID year, and then in the Super Bowl, infamously only scoring 3 points against the Patriots. That one was very tough to watch. But then last year, I thought he was all right. He was pretty good in that Rams game in the wild card, and then very good in the Bucs game in the divisional. And then I thought he was pretty good as well against that Niners defense in the NFC Championship game, but obviously did end up choking it on a couple of those fourth downs. So that's why he's not an A tier there. Then we have C.J. Stroud. He has 2 wild card playoff victories in his career here, and that's got to speak for something in this AFC, getting the win over Justin Herbert there. But I think that his play has somewhat declined this week. I mean, he could definitely go into A tier if he does upset this Chiefs team this week. But just as of my sentiment right now being pretty bearish about this Texans team's chances against Kansas City, I'm going to have him in the B tier. And then Daniels going up to the B tier. If he does upset this Lions team, definitely upgrade him to A tier after this week. But just at this point, as a rookie, I think it's pretty impressive to be in the B tier at this point, potentially the best quarterback in the NFC, as I mentioned. And then Hurts, I know that some Philly fans are going to be irate at this ranking here, but if you look at his performances in the playoffs, 2021 at Tampa Bay, he was really pitiful in that game. And then the 2 playoff victories in the NFC Divisional and then the Conference Championship in 2022 against the Giants and Niners really didn't do anything. It was really like the Packers game that you saw this past week. The defense plays very well. They win the turnover battle, and then the running game just goes off. And then he gets a couple touchdowns, but not many yards, not many completions there. So yet to see him play really well. Probably his best game was in that Super Bowl against the Chiefs there, but did have a very devastating fumble that was lost, returned for a touchdown for Kansas City in that game. So he's going to have to light up in some of these games, maybe not till the NFC Championship against potentially the Lions, but definitely will have to do so against either the Chiefs, Bills, or Ravens there in the Super Bowl. And until I see it, I will not believe it there. So give me Hurts at the C tier, and definitely with that being the case, the defense and the running game could carry him to the championship, but I will have to see him elevate before I put him in the B tier or above there. So with all that being said, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below of my power rankings and QB rankings. As always, be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one.